Hello and welcome back to Kim Reads as we continue with Sleeping Beauty and other stories. How the Hermit helped win the princess. Long ago there lived a very rich man who had 3 sons. When he felt himself to be dying, he divided his property amongst them, making them share and share alike, both in money and in lands. Soon after he died, the king set forth a proclamation throughout the whole country that whoever could build a ship that should float both on land and sea should have his daughter to wife. The eldest brother, when he heard it, said to the others, "I think I will spend some of my money in trying to build a ship, so I'd have the king for my father-in-law." So he called together all the shipbuilders in the land and gave them orders to begin the ship without delay. Trees were cut down and great preparations made. In a few days, everybody knew what it was all for, and there was a crowd of people pressing through the gates of the yard, when the young man spent the most of his day. "Ah, master, give us work," they said, "so that we may earn our bread." But he only gave them hard words and spoke roughly to them. "You are old and have lost your strength. Of what use are you?" And he drove them away. Then came some boys and prayed him, "Master, give us work." But he answered, "Of what use can you be, weaklings as you are? Get you gone." And if any presented themselves that were not skilled workmen, he would have none of them. And at last knocked on the gate a little old man with a long white beard, who said, "Will you give me work so that I may earn my bread?" But he was driven away like the rest. The ship took a long while to build, and it cost a great deal of money. And when it was launched, a sudden squall rose, and it fell to pieces, and with it all the young man's hopes of winning the princess. By this time he had not a penny left, so he went back to his 2 brothers and told his tale. And so his brother said to himself as he listened, "Certainly he may manage very badly, but I would like to see if I can't do better and win the princess for my own self." So he called together all the shipbuilders throughout the country and gave them orders to build a ship which should float on the land as well as on sea. But his heart was no softer than his brothers, and every man who was not a skilled workman was chased away with hard words. Last came the white-bearded men, but he fared no better than the rest. When the ship was finished, the launch took place and everything seemed to be going when a gale sprang up. The vessel was dashed to pieces on the rocks. The young man had spent his whole fortune in it and was allowed to be swallowed up. He was forced to beg shelter from his youngest brother. When he told his story, the youngest brother said to himself, "I am not rich enough to support all 3. I'd better take my turn, and if I manage to win the princess there will be a fortune as well as my own for us to live on." So he called together for all the shipbuilders in the kingdom and gave orders that a new ship would be built. Then all the old people came and asked for work, and he said cheerfully, "Oh yes, there is plenty for everybody." And when the boys begged to be allowed to be helped, he found something they could do. And when the old man with the long white beard stood before him, praying that he might earn his bread, he replied, "Oh, father, I could not suffer you to work, but you shall be overseer and look after the rest." Now the old man was a holy hermit, and we saw how kind-hearted the youth was. He determined to do all he could for him to gain the wish of his heart. By and by, when the ship was finished, the hermit said to his young friend, "Now you go and claim the king's daughter, for the ship will float by land and sea." "Oh, good father," cried the young man, "you will not forsake me? Stay with me, I pray you, and lead me to the king." "If you wish it, I will," said the hermit, "on the condition that you will give me half of everything you get." "Oh, if that is all," answered he, "it is easily promised." And they set out together on the ship. After they had gone some distance, they saw a man standing in a thick fog, for which he was trying to pull a sack. "Oh, good father," exclaimed the youth, "what can he be doing?" "Ask him," said the old man. "What are you doing, my fine fellow?" "I am putting the fog in my sack. That is my business." "Ask if he wants to come with us," whispered the hermit. And the man answered, "If you will give me enough to eat and drink, I will gladly stay with you." So they took him on their ship, and the youth said, as they started off again, "Good father, before we were 2, and now we are 3. And after they traveled a little farther, they met a man who had torn up half the forest and was carrying all those trees on his shoulders. "Good father," exclaimed the youth, "only look, what can he have done that for?" Ask him why he has torn up all the trees. And the man replied, "Oh, I've merely been gathering a handful of brushwood." "Beg him to come with us," whispered the hermit. And the strong man answered, "Willingly, as long as you give me enough to eat and drink." And he came on the ship. And the youth said to the hermit, "Good father, before we were 3, and now we are 4. The ship traveled on again some miles further on what they saw a man drinking out of a stream till he had nearly drunk it dry. "Good father," said the youth, "just look at that man. Did you ever see anybody drink like that?" "Ask him why he does it," answered the hermit. "Why, there's nothing very odd in taking a mouthful of water," replied the man, standing up. "Beg him to come with us." And the youth did so. "With pleasure, as long as you give me enough to eat and drink." And the youth whispered to the hermit, "Good father, before we were 4, and now we are 5. A little long way they noticed another man in the middle of the stream who was shooting into the water. "Good father," said the youth, "what can we be shooting at?" "Ask him," said the hermit. "Hush, hush," cried the man. "Now you have frightened it away. In the underworld sits this quail on a tree, and I wanted to shoot. That is my business. I hit everything I aim at. Ask him if he will come with us." And the man replied, "With all my heart, as long as I get enough to eat and drink." So they took him on the ship, and the young man whispered, "Good father, before we were 5, and now we are 6. Off they went again, and before they had gone far away, they met a man striding toward them, whose steps were so long that while one foot was on the north of the island, the other was right down in the south. "Good father, look at him. What long steps he takes." "Ask him why he does it," replied the hermit. "Oh, I'm only going for a little walk," answered he. "Ask him if he will come with us." "Gladly, if you can give me as much as I want to eat and drink," said he, climbing the ship. And the young man whispered, "Good father, before we were 6, and now we are 7. But the hermit knew what he was doing and why he gathered strange people on the ship. And after many days, at last, they reached the town where they lived, the king and his daughter. They stopped the vessel right in front of the palace, and the young man went in and bowed low before the king. "Oh, Majesty, I have done your bidding, and now is a ship built that can travel over land and sea. Give me my regard, and let me have your daughter to wife." But the king said to himself, "What? Am I to wed my daughter to a man of whom I know nothing? Not either whether he rich or poor, a knight or a beggar." And aloud he spoke, "It is not enough that you have managed to build a ship. You must find a runner who shall take this letter to the ruler of the underworld, and bring me an answer back in an hour." "That is not the bond," answered the young man. "Well, do as you like," replied the king, "only you will not yet my daughter." The young man went out, sorely troubled, to tell his friends what happened. "Silly boy," cried the hermit, "accept his terms at once, and send off the long-legged man with the letter. He will take no time at all." So the youth's heart leapt with joy, and he returned to the king. "Majesty, I accept your terms. Here is the messenger who will do what you wish." The king had no choice but to give the man a letter, and he strode off, making his short work of the distance that lay between the palace and the underworld. He soon found the ruler, who looked at the letter and said to him, "Wait a little while I write an answer." But the man was so tired with his quick walk that he went to sleep and forgot all about his errand. All this time, the youth was anxiously counting the minutes till he could get back, and stood with his eyes fixed on the road down which his messenger must come. "What can be keeping him?" he said to the hermit when the hour was nearly up. Then the hermit sent for the man who could hit everything he aimed at, and said to him, "Just see why the messenger is staying so long." "Oh, he is sound asleep at the palace of the underworld. However, I can soon wake him." And he drew his bow and shot an arrow straight at the man's knee. Ugh. The messenger awoke with a start, and when he saw that the hour had almost run out, he snatched up the answer and rushed back with such speed that the clock had not struck when he entered the palace. Now the young man thought he was sure of his bride, but the king said, "Still you have not done enough. Before I give you my daughter, you must find a man who can drink half the contents of my cellar in one day." "That is not the bond," complained the poor youth. "Well, do as you like, only you will not get my daughter." The young man went sadly out and asked the hermit what he was to do. "Silly boy," said he, "why tell the man to do it who drinks up everything?" So they sent for the man. He said, "Do you really think you're able to drink half the royal cellar in one day?" "Dear me, yes, and much more as you want," answered he. "I am never satisfied." The king was not pleased at the young man agreeing so readily, but he had no choice, and ordered the servant to be taken downstairs. Oh, how he enjoyed himself! All day long he drank, and drank, and drank, till, instead of half a cellar, he had drunk the whole, and there was not a cask but what stood empty. When the king saw, he had said to the youth, "You have conquered, and I can no longer withhold my daughter. But, as her dowry, I shall only give it so much as one man can carry away." "But," answered he, "let a man be so ever strong, he cannot carry more than 100 weight. And what is that for a king's daughter?" "Well, do what you like. I have had my say. It is your affair, not mine." The young man was puzzled, and didn't know what to reply, for he would gladly marry the princess without a sixpence. He had still spent all his money in building the ship, and knew he could not give her all she wanted. So she went to the hermit and said to him, "The king will only give for her dowry as much as a man can carry. I have no money of my own left. My brothers have none either." "Silly boy, why have you only got to fetch the man who carried half the forest on his shoulders?" And the youth was glad, and called the strong man and told him what he must do. "Take everything you can till you are bent double. Never mind if you leave the palace bare." The strong man promised, and notably kept his word. He piled all he could on his back: chairs, tables, wardrobes, chests of gold and silver, until there was nothing left to pile. At last he took the king's crown and put it on top. He carried his burden to the ship and stowed his treasures away, and the youth followed, leaving the king's daughter. But the king was left raging in his empty palace, and he called together his army and got ready for ships of war in order to take that you might not go after the vessel and bring what has been taken away. And the king's ships sailed very fast and soon caught up with the vessel, and the sailors all shouted for joy. The hermit looked out and saw where they were, and said to the youth, "Do you see that?" The youth shrieked and cried, "Ah, good father, it is a fleet of ships, and they are chasing us, and in a few moments they will be upon us." But the hermit bade call the man who had the fog in his sack, and the sack was open, and the fog flew out and hung right around the king's ship, so that they could see nothing. So he sailed back to the palace and told the king what strange things that had happened. Meanwhile, the young man's vessel reached home safely. "Well, here you are once more," said the hermit, "and now you can fill your promise you made me to give me half of all you had." "That I will do with all my heart," answered the youth, and began to divide all his treasures, putting part of one side for himself and setting the other side for his friend. "Good father, it is finished," he said at length. "There is nothing more left to divide." "Nothing more left?" cried the hermit. "Why, you've forgotten the best thing of all." "What can that be?" asked he. "We have divided everything." "And the king's daughter?" said the hermit. The young man's heart stood still, for he loved her dearly, but he answered, "It is well, I have sworn, and I will keep my word." And he drew his sword to cut her to pieces. When the hermit saw that he held his honor dearer than his wife, he lifted his hand and cried, "Hold, she is yours, and all the treasures too. I have given you my help because you had pity on those that were in need. And when you are in need yourself, call upon me, and I will come to you." As he spoke, he softly touched their heads and vanished. The next day, the wedding took place, and the two brothers came to the house, and they all lived happily ever after. They never forgot the holy man who had been such a good friend. And that's the end of that story. See you later.